Olive groves, farmland, rich for growing food. During the property boom, the speculators bought up these fields and multiplied their cost enormously, boosting the price of housing. But the land speculators thought that they could get rich quick, and many of them did. They turned the fields into vast housing developments. Instead of growing the wheat that's needed, picking the olives, they grew houses. But the purpose of those houses was not to house families at prices they could afford. It was to turn the windfall gains from the land into fortunes which they could stash away in Switzerland, out of the reach of the Spanish taxman. Unfortunately for them, prices grew so high, the global property market went bust, and the dreams of the families that thought that they would own homes that would rise in value disappeared into thin air. This is the consequence of land speculation. Because the tax regime actually rewards speculators and penalizes people who work, the result is that today in Spain, something like 20% of the working population doesn't have work. About 5 million working people jobless. 1 million families have no financial support whatsoever. Children go to school hungry. For what? For the dreams of the land speculators who wanted to get rich quick. This is one of the victims of the property boom bust in Spain. It's a ghost town, literally a town. A landowner chose to build this development of 2,500 apartments in the middle of nowhere in the Spanish countryside south of Madrid. But no one lives in any of these apartments, a vast waste of capital when people need homes that they can afford. There was no infrastructure here for the schools, the health clinics, all the needs of ordinary families, and yet the speculation boom mania was such that the property owner thought that he could make a fortune by sticking these apartments up in the middle of nowhere. The result now is that the local authority is having to invest vast amounts of money in a neighbouring apartment block to provide the social services that are needed. Those social services ought to be made available in the other existing settlements around this area. But because many families are now stranded in the middle of nowhere, the pressure is on the local government to provide the schools and the health clinics and the rest of the social infrastructure that's needed. That's money that is being underused in this location, which means that other people elsewhere are being sold short, are not receiving the services that they need just because the property speculator tried to make a lot of money out of building these apartments in the middle of nowhere. How do we solve this problem of the property boom busts that are destroying jobs and people's dreams? The answer is quite simple. We need to abolish taxes on people's wages and the profits of entrepreneurs. Profits that are got from creating jobs and products that can be sold on the global markets. If we abolish those taxes, how would we pay for the public services? Well, the answer is here. It's very simple. We need to collect the rents of land, the urban land and rural land, and all the rents that are generated by, for instance, the electromagnetic spectrum that we use when we turn on our mobile telephones. If we collected those rents, and those rents are community created, we all contribute to the value that we call the rents of land and natural resources. If we collected them, we would have enough money to pay for public services. In that event, we could get rid of the taxes that destroy people's jobs and crush the dreams of families who are now living homeless and children going to school without food in their bellies. a lovely facade for a new housing development in California. But behind this waterfall lies a terrible truth, one that Washington and Wall Street want to keep as their dirty secret. One million families every year have their homes repossessed because they can't afford to keep up the mortgages. In the richest nation on earth, people are living in tents in cities like this one, Riverside in California, along riverbanks, in caves dug into the side of rivers. This is supposed to be the superpower, the arch example of the market economy in action, and yet families can't keep roofs over their heads. The water tower on the top of a barren hill is where dozens of families have been sent to live because they can't afford the high prices of land within the city of Riverside. If we pan around, we see that this vacant site is within a 5-minute walking distance of a railway, the railway that would take people, the commuters, into Los Angeles where they would work. This land stands idle now, the land speculator expecting to make huge capital gains sometime in the future. Meanwhile, people driven to develop lands on the barren hillside. There is no mystery as to why families are having their homes foreclosed. The subprime mortgage is the term that is used to symbolize the fact that the financial system went into crisis in 2008. But what caused the bankers to recklessly lend money to people who couldn't afford it? It was the pursuit of the unearned gains from land. Land is the one asset that delivers the largest, apparently safest, capital gain to speculators. But historically we know that it's not the safest asset. Time and again there is a property boom and then a big bust. And the people who pay the price are the families whose homes are repossessed. That instability is driven by the pursuit of capital gains from land. Well, if that's the reason, then surely that is where policy should be focused. Not talking about re-regulating the bankers, greedy bankers and their bonuses, all of which, yes, happened. Yes, there were crooks, there were scams, a lot of money was made, but none of that would have been possible if the financial system was structured so as to reward the people who go to work, who add value to the economy, who produce goods and services that they can sell to the consumers. Our tax system penalizes those people. Instead, what we do is reward the pursuit of capital gains from land. It's not the buildings that make the real money, the big bucks for the developers. It's the land underneath those buildings, the capital gains. And the tax system privileges people who speculate in land, hoarding it for not just years but decades, making towns sprawl. This is an example of the huge waste of capital, scarce capital, that could be used in other ways. Roads that lead to nowhere, to barren land that was supposed to be developed by the speculators who wanted to make the financial killing. Instead, having installed the infrastructure, the market went belly up. Now these plots will remain vacant for years, if not decades. But in the meantime, the money that was invested in highways such as this one could have been used for schools and hospitals. Not more than a mile away from here, there's a school, brand new, empty. It will not now be used because the local government has run out of money. It can't afford to pay for the teachers to staff the school. So having invested in that school, the building, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, children will not be educated in that institution because the property tax here in America is not now generating enough revenue to pay for the staff, the school books and the tuition that the children of America badly need. Now, if Washington and Wall Street was honest about it, they would say that that's what was driving the current financial crisis. Some people would say that it was criminal that houses like this should be standing vacant. Billions of dollars of scarce capital has been locked up in the construction of very good dwellings which families desperately need. But this is all because of an ideology that can be crystallized in the terms of the efficient market hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, which in general economists subscribe to before the boom that then went crash, according to this hypothesis, the market was efficient. People would do the rational thing. There would be no full-scale foreclosure of homes because people wouldn't get into debt that they couldn't afford to pay. Well, we now know that this efficient market is extremely inefficient, but actually it's not the market that's at fault. The fault really lies with government. Government allows this kind of thing to happen. How can we blame government? Well, they have the policy tools, the power to do something about it. They can restructure the tax incentives so that they encourage people who create jobs, the entrepreneurs and the people who are willing to work to make a living, and they can invite the owners of land like this to pay for the services that they receive from the community. If the landowners who want to use those services paid the full value for them, in the way that we do when we go into a supermarket and expect to collect goods off the shelves, we don't walk out of those shops expecting someone else to subsidize us, do we? Why is it that landowners expect to be subsidized by a property tax that is actually perverse? Government has the power to do something about that, and it refuses to do so. It thinks it's pandering to the homeowner, but the homeowner is suffering as much as anybody else. It's about time we sent a message to Washington, to Westminster, to Brussels, to all politicians, that they will be held accountable for failing to introduce a pricing mechanism that serves both the private sector, the people who produce the wealth, and the public sector, the sector that delivers services to the community. 1 million families have their homes foreclosed every year here in the United States. When is Washington and Wall Street going to tell the truth?
They ride along the fading trails of long, long ago, and sparks of hoofbeats glitter in the shadows as they go. Out across the backlands where the dust is laid so long, you'll see them loping through the night and hear their riding song. The years are long and many since they rode down into town. It's now just weeds and wormy boards and shacks all tumbled down. Where once they stood up to the bar and pretty girls discussed, they now hear ghostly laughter through a veil of heavy dust. Hats and boots and saddles are all moldy as they ride. Their faces grim and silent, cause for them all time has died. Out there with the night wind they ride on through the dust, and guns a-swinging at their sides have crumbled into rust. You'll see them in the history books or in a cloudy sky. Their fame will live forever and their ghosts will never die. Out there with the night wind they they ride because they must, though deep down in some lonely grave they've long since turned to dust.
Clock strikes another night under the moon. The wind's groaning, I'm hoping to get blown away soon. Got to see how far I can go. Got to know where you are and what you know. In your ghost town, the best town I've ever seen. Your town, best dream I've ever dreamed. Street bands play, now I wanna play. Grass is greener, I don't want to know about tomorrow. In my ghost town, best town I've ever seen. My town, best dream I've ever dreamed. Is this how it's gonna stay? Am I really dying away in my ghost town? Best town I've ever seen. Your town, best dream I've ever dreamed. Ghost town, best town I've ever seen.
25 years ago, the entire 50,000 population of the Ukrainian town of Pripyat was evacuated within 3 hours.
Lyosha, could you please step aside? I'm working and you're getting in my shot. Thank you.
They left most of what they had here, as they were told they were leaving only for a couple of days. But none of them has ever returned. The last thing they saw upon leaving their hometown was the 4th block of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, devastated by a powerful explosion.
Where are we going?
We need to go to Pripyat's post office. Recently I received a notification to pick up a letter here in Pripyat.
That's impossible. That post office hasn't been working for 25 years. I don't think it's for real. Well, show me. It's strange, but according to this stamp, this really has come from here.
Do you know where this post office is?
Yes, I know. All these trees that you see, they've all grown since the accident. And right now we're going to be passing the house where I was born.
We came to the Chernobyl exclusion zone to investigate a very strange story. This place has been deserted for a quarter of a century, but recently some people started receiving post notices telling them to pick up letters at this post office in Pripyat. I'm holding one of those here, and indeed, the stamp here proves that it came from the ghost town.
Frankly speaking, I do not know what to look for. These notices have no addresses nor names of those who had sent them.
You know, honestly speaking, I don't think we're going to find anything here. Most of the things that remained here and in the apartments were later buried. They didn't keep them because they were very radioactive. And the rest was stolen by scavengers.
Look, here's a letter, which someone failed to send from here. And there is a photo inside.
Lucky you. All the times I've been here, I've never seen anything like this.
Лёша, а здесь вообще есть связь?
Do cell phones work here?
They work at the nuclear power plant, and sometimes they work here.
Алло?
Hello?
Hi.
Алло, кто это?
Hello, who are you calling?
Hi, I'll be late from work tonight. Can you pick our daughter up from kindergarten?
Простите, вы кому звоните?
Excuse me, who is it? Whom are you calling?
I beg your pardon. I must have dialed the wrong number.
Понятно.
I don't get it.
Our investigation brings us to one of Pripyat's kindergartens, and this one is truly a horrifying scene. Most of the things one can see here have been left untouched ever since the catastrophe. And the site which gives probably the best description and most dramatic one of the Chernobyl tragedy is that children's toys are laying literally side by side with military gas masks.
Это мой родной детский
This
сад.
is my kindergarten.
Я сюда ходил.
I used to go here.
В Припяти вообще было много детей.
There used to be
потому
many
что,
children in Pripyat.
Сюда на строительство станции съехали
Specialists from all over the
специалисты со всей
Soviet Union came here
В основном
to operate the nuclear power station,
молодые люди.
mostly young people.
Они считали, что
And they thought that
их ожидает
they were
счастливое
waiting for a
будущее.
bright future.
Так что здесь был такой...
So this town experienced a baby boom.
Противогазами, кстати, никто не пользовался, потому что...
No one used the gas masks, look out there,
Потому что,
because
когда произошла
the
авария, было
catastrophe
суббота,
happened on a Saturday.
их сюда завезли.
They had been kept
противогазы,
here
потом
and
здесь остались.
were left untouched.
Слушай, а в том письме, которое мы нашли, что...
What was in that letter you found?
Знаешь, тут фотография какая-то.
There is a photograph inside.
Вот, посмотри.
Here, have a look.
Но так, судя по почерку,
It seems it was written by a child, a small girl.
здравствуй. Я очень
Hi there.
обрадовалась твоему
I was so
письму.
glad having received your letter, so I decided to reply at once.
My mom got me a new doll. She's so beautiful that I'm sometimes afraid to play with her. When I go to school in the morning, I put her by the window and make a bed for her in the evening. I love her dearly. The weather has already been very warm here. We'll be having a holiday soon. My parents and I will go to a rally. We will be inflating balloons. And after that, there will be a concert in the House of Cultural Activities. My sister will be dancing there. Even though she's small, she's already a great dancer. We're missing you very much. Please come and visit us in the summer.
We're missing you very much.
Приезжай к
Please
нам
come
летом.
visit us in the summer.
Знаешь, в этом письме упоминается празднование 1
It mentions the
мая в Доме
first May
культуры.
events in the Pripyat House of Culture, and kids from this kindergarten were to perform at a concert there.
А когда было написано письмо?
When was that letter written?
Ты знаешь, судя по штемпелю...
Well, the
на
date on the
конверте
envelope
здесь,
says it was meant to be
аккурат
sent
накануне катастрофы.
just the day before the catastrophe.
On the eve of the catastrophe, many celebrations had been planned for Saturday and Sunday. They always schedule wedding celebrations and children's concerts for the weekend. Even when the tragedy happened, we didn't call off the festive events. The children were breathing this air as it was a hot day and the events were out in the open. Many people were in the parks, and I know that there were weddings in the House of Culture. In the end, we were informed that it was very serious and that we were to go home and pack up for evacuation.
May the 1st was one of the biggest communist holidays in the Soviet Union, the Labor Day. Pripyat's House of Culture still has a collection of posters with Soviet leaders. They were meant to be carried at a traditional demonstration, and this stage over here was meant to become a venue for a holiday concert.
Алексей,
Alexei,
я тут нашел кое-что.
look what I found.
Костюм пожарного.
It's a fireman's suit.
Как ты считаешь, это
Could it
может
be
быть
that it belonged
костюм
to one of
тех,
those
кто участвовал в
firefighters who
пожаре
fought the blaze at the nuclear power plant?
Да нет, нет.
Absolutely not,
Они
no.
же почти все погибли.
Most of them died,
А одежда была такой
and their gear was
радиоактивной,
so
что её
radioactive
сразу уничтожили.
that it was destroyed almost immediately afterwards.
Ты знаешь, тут был
You know, there used to be
театр,
an
я думаю,
amateur
может, это
theater
такой.
here. Maybe it's theirs.
У меня такое ощущение, что мы
To be
застряли.
honest, I feel we're stuck.
У тебя есть какие-то
Have you got
мысли?
any
Куда мы
ideas
можем
where we
сходить?
could go next?
Well,
Тут была библиотека.
There used to be a library here. We could check out the
Там могла
reader's
остаться
profile
картотека
cards.
Знаешь, это
You
был
know,
очень красивый
this
город.
city was very beautiful
Его, кстати, даже создавали
and
как
was meant to
такой
be
образец.
kind of a role model for others.
такая вершина
Like the best place a communist society could ever build, perfectly planned and constructed.
такое
Pripyat was meant to be a paradise for those building communism.
Wait a minute. I found a note inside this picture book. It looks like a page from someone's diary. It is dated April the 25th, 1986. We're preparing an experiment at the station. We'll be bringing the reactor to a stop. We have some heated debates. Most of us are sure that we're doing everything right, but still cannot come to a conclusion. Times it seems we're talking on different languages.
There was a confrontation. Workers didn't want to keep the unstable reactor in operation. According to conversations and documentation that have been published already, the reactor was out of control. On the 25th of April, the employees were saying that it was faulty, but the bosses demanded that they should finish the experiment that they were performing on the unstable reactor.
I saw a picture in daughter's art book with the Babylonian Tower. I joked that we have now finally built it.
I'm on top of Pripyat's tallest building. It is the best vantage point to see the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Straight after the disaster, it was covered by a steel lid called the sarcophagus. Underneath it are still tons of radioactive fuel and deadly levels of radiation. But if you don't know that, from here, Pripyat almost looks alive.
Now, the apartment we're looking for should be somewhere here.
Do you know where this drawing came from?
It appeared here several years ago, actually. I don't know. The elevator shaft is open, so be careful. We need to go this way.
Let's go.
Attention. 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 Dear comrades, the council of the town reports.
It was a usual Saturday, and it was a very warm day. We did not feel like studying. After the second lesson, teachers were called for a meeting and left us to ourselves. At that time, we heard that something bad had happened at the reactor. Many of the children's parents worked there, and they talked about what they had heard from them. I learned that there had been a blaze at the station, and several people were injured. But we could not imagine how serious it was. We thought that a fire was nothing to be afraid of. At school, we were taught that atomic energy is the safest in the world.
I was still a kid when the tragedy happened. We played outdoors, went to the rooftop, and saw the blaze at the station. There was smoke coming out of the building from the explosion. Radiation levels were already extremely high. Of course, everyone, young and old, was exposed to huge radiation doses. Oh, it still works.
There's almost nothing left here. Can you look through your archives? Maybe there is some information about this person there.
Just a second. Yes. Yes, I have something. He was one of those who was supposed to be performing an experiment at the station, which means that during the moment of the explosion, he should have been there. All of the workers who were working at the 4th block were immediately sent to a hospital, as they were severely irradiated. We could go to the hospital. Maybe we can find something there.
That is a good idea.
Подожди,
Wait a minute.
Что с его семьей, как ты думаешь?
What about his family?
Не знаю, у меня
I don't know.
нет информации.
I have no information on them.
The injuries were different, but the majority were exposed to third or fourth radiation levels and received third or fourth degree burns. One patient died of burns. The others were treated at our medical facility, and then they were brought to Moscow. Those with the fourth level of radiation were in shock, disoriented, and the rest?
The injured are being brought here from the power plant. They are all covered in radioactive dust and ash. We are receiving strong doses here too, and we are completely unready for what has happened. I don't believe in all this. It just cannot be happening. This is real hell.
What's that?
A note. I found it inside a patient record card.
We need to leave.
What's happening?
We are leaving. Please make your decision quicker. The radiation levels are very high here.
Leszek, please tell me, what is this cross doing there?
It's a protective cross. There are 4 of them in the Ukraine, and they form a square. In the south, in the east, and in the west. This is the northern one. Does your cell phone work?
No, there's no signal whatsoever.
Well then, we're stuck. Here, hold this. There's a village not far from here. On the other side of the river, a few elderly couples live there. They might have a radio phone. If not, then at least we can stay overnight.
As we walked through that field, I saw a herd of wild horses. Where have they come from?
They were brought here straight after the catastrophe in the 90s. It was an experiment to see how they would survive the radiation. And now they've grown into a huge population. The same happened to all the other animals. There's no people here. That's why they feel safe.
What is this village? Who lives here?
There's a couple of elderly people that live here.
Wait a minute, they were evacuated after the catastrophe, weren't they? Why are they here?
They were. Well, they came back. They resettled here of their own free will. Oh, hello, Matriona Nikolaevna.
Hello.
Hello there.
How do you live here on your own? There's no transportation or facilities.
They provide us with a free bus to the city when we need something from the market. It used to be once a month.
How often?
But now it's less often. This horse is used by everyone in the village when they need to carry something.
Can we sleep over there near the stove, maybe?
Yes, I will give you blankets and pillows.
We'll throw down a blanket or something and set ourselves up.
I still don't understand. Who sent me those post notices?
You remember the old man who ferried us across the river? Apparently, he's a postman. And once a fortnight, he cruises up and down the river and delivers mail.
So you think he did it?
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe somebody else. Maybe it was a mistake.
It's interesting. It looked as a spooky mystery at first, but there's such an easy solution. Apart from the resettlers we have seen, do you think anyone will ever come back here?
I don't know. They said the sarcophagus they built in 1986 was temporary. They said it was temporary because it would last for 20 to 30 years. Now they're building a new one. This one's supposed to last 100 years. And you know what's funny? They also call it temporary. That means that both you and I and our children will be gone, and it'll still be standing there.
After all the walks through Pripyat, and having looked at these pictures, I still don't understand why you describe this town as beautiful. To me it looks like an ordinary Soviet town, typical buildings and planning. There were thousands of towns like that across the country.
It was beautiful because we lived here.
You know, I've been having this feeling that you just cannot let go of all that happened here. As if you continue fighting the zone.
How can I forgive it?
Maybe you should try talking to the zone.
How? It's not sending me letters.
Well, those I received were not directed to me either.
If they were not meant for you, then you would never have found them or read them in the first place.
These people have just crossed the country to come to California. Business reasons, maybe, sign a contract, or break one. Perhaps they came to visit their relatives or just to see the sights. The Golden Gate Bridge, the footprints of movie stars and the sidewalk outside Grauman's Chinese Theater, the mountains. The mountains attracted a different class of tourists once. You remember the 49ers, the gold seekers? They came on anything that had wheels, and if they didn't have wheels, they came anyway. The gold seekers of 1849. Towns grew up quickly around the mines. Big towns, some of them. A little rough and ready, but not as much as you would probably think. Then when the mines were played out, or when the government lowered the price on gold, the people pulled out and left the derelict towns behind them. The ghost towns. A ghost town always had a kind of fascination for me. This one is 8,400 feet up in the mountains, just east of the high Sierras, near the Nevada line. Name, Bodie, California. Born around 1856. Died, question mark. It was started by a man named Bodie, who took a look at those hills and decided they contained a lot of gold. He was right, too. Though not being a prospector, I can't say the hills impressed me very much when I saw them. Bodie had a placer claim on all this territory, which means he panned the stuff by hand. He took out $500, though it's doubtful if he got to spend much of it, because he broke his leg while he was hiking after supplies. And by the time they found him, which was after the snows had thawed, well, Bodie took out $500, and in the town they named after him, they took out 80 million more. This is the main street of Bodie. It used to be 2 miles long from stem to stern, with a racetrack at one end and Chinatown at the other. It's considerably shorter now. Considerably. The fires have done that. Like all mining towns, Bodie has had a lot of fires. The fire bell there is about the most important single piece of equipment they had. It's still shiny and new looking. Maybe that's because of the workout it got. The firehouse is standing on the site of the last big fire. Started by a little boy, 3.5 years old, who wanted to have some fun with a box of matches he found. The fire burned out almost all of Bodie's business district, burned down the Occidental Hotel and a lot of stores. That's the machine they used to fight the fires. I was able to look in some of the houses, the ones with sides missing, because of the weight of the snows or because of the fires. But the houses that were still intact, they were all locked. They had furniture inside and curtains on the windows. They looked as if they were waiting, but I didn't have a ghost of an idea what for. I had thought the town was deserted, and then I saw this little gnome-like fellow. I won't say I thought he was one of the ghosts, though he certainly did blend into the scenery. I didn't meet him, though, until later. I was walking down the board sidewalk, the little piece that's left of it, the rest was burned out, looking at the Main Street architecture. That building was the Miners' Union Hall, according to the sign they had over the door. Don't ask me why they had the peephole. Maybe they didn't trust each other then any more than you and I do. Anyway, while I was investigating this, the little fellow appeared. He turned out to be the caretaker. I couldn't see what there was to be taken care of or why. Didn't like to come right out and ask him. He was proud of his town, and I didn't want to risk insulting him. The caretaker told me a lot about Bodie's history. That mine was the old Standard, the only one left of the 17 operating during the town's heyday. The smaller building is a cyanide mill. The cyanide process for removing gold is old stuff now, but that was the first cyanide mill of the country. Bodie had the first electric line too, or the longest. The first or the longest, I forget which it was now, maybe both. It struck out from the Standard mine straight across those hills, and it didn't have a bend in it. The caretaker said they were afraid the electricity would jump the track if the line curved. Another thing, they used square wire. Why square? Oh, he guessed they just figured they could cram more juice into a square wire than a round one. The power's been turned off in Bodie for years. The sawmill there operated from a gasoline engine, but they haven't had any gas in Bodie for a long time either. That was one of the last automobiles that had any call for it. That'll give you an idea. The man who ran the filling station had the butcher shop across the street. All the stores in Bodie were independently owned, not like a lot of mining towns. That's the general store. The scales on the counter weren't for groceries, though. They used them to weigh the gold. And it was a real general store. The caretaker said the miners and their bosses got on very well, all things considered. Never was a strike. They shortened the hours from 12 to 10, then again from 10 to 8. No trouble about it, though. They didn't have any mining disasters in Bodie either. No cave-ins or anything like that. I asked him about the cemetery. There didn't seem to be many graves, but he said a lot of them had been erased by the snows and by time. The thing that impressed me was how many children were there. In the graveyard of a ghost town, you'd expect to find old people buried. That little girl was only 3. She was killed by an Indian who was swinging a pick. It was an accident. The angel is pointing to the place where the pick went in. Funerals would wind up that hill. They were big occasions. There was a tall black hearse with 4 black plumes, and the whole town would turn out to follow it up the hill. Procession would start on Main Street at that little building. That's the morgue. Used to be a photographer studio, but he went out of business. The undertaker didn't. You see a lot of safes in Bodie. A lot of vaults, too. Those vaults were the strongest buildings in town. You think they kept the gold there? So did I. No, that's where they kept the liquor. I think they had a high regard for spirits. One fellow kept his, appropriately enough, in a hollow tombstone up in the graveyard. You see where the back has fallen off? Held 6 quarts. I really don't know what I expected to see when I came to Bodie. Just a lot of old houses, I suppose. Well, Bodie had 'em. Some were standing, but leaning. Some were leaning a little bit more. and some had given up altogether, like the blacksmith shop there. No, I really can't say what I expected to find in a ghost town, but certainly not people. There is a population, though. 9, counting the kids. The caretaker told me the Bells lived in that house, so I called on Mrs. Bell. A little lady in a faded blue dress. Didn't want to smile because she had a missing tooth. Mrs. Bell, I said, I understand you're the only lady in Bodie. That's right, she said. I'm the Belle of Bodie. Well then, Mrs. Bell, I asked, I wonder if you can tell me something about the town. She wouldn't do it, though. She said she was a newcomer. Only been there 20 years. She told me she would call her husband. He had been born there. Well, Mr. Bell knew all about Bodie, all right. I asked him about the locked houses. Seems the whole town is owned by a man named Kane. J.S. Kane, that is, not the old man. Old Vic Kane owned most of Bodie in his day. His son owns it now, what's left of it. But old Vic owned it when there were 12,000 people, when there were 17 mines, when they were hauling gold out of the mountains every day. Old Vic came from Canada way with nothing in his pockets but his hands. But before long, he'd gotten hold of the bank. That's the bank. In a card game, they say, but they always say something like that about any successful man. You know that. But before he was through, he had bought up the Standard Mine and practically anything else in town worth buying. They say he was controlled by some San Francisco millionaires. But as far as the people in Bodie were concerned, old Vic was the man. They made him the mayor. That's his house. The only mayor the town ever had. Those were pretty rough days. I understand they used to have some real bad men, Mr. Bell. I'd heard stories about the bad men from Bodie. That jail might look like it's coming apart at the seams, but the cells are still plenty strong. They had to be. These bad men weren't the real citizens of Bodie, just a bunch of freebooters who drifted in from Virginia City and Aurora following the gold smell. They used to average 3 killings a day. Always had a good supply of tombstones handy. That block of granite was a tombstone, too, in a way. Used to have a ceremony where they would lay a wreath on the block after a big fire and say, Bodie is dead, Bodie is buried. They buried it 3 times, but the town wouldn't stay dead. Not as long as there was gold. Besides the Bells, there's another family in town, the Biggses. They account for the total population of 9, counting the kids. Mr. Biggs is a diamond drill man. He sets the diamonds in the bit himself. He told me that bit will go through anything, and I guess he's right. He has himself a claim on the other side of the mountain. First day they started drilling, they found a rattlesnake. So they're going to call it the Rattlesnake Mine. If you hear about a big strike east of the Sierras at the Rattlesnake Mine, that's the man. That was the answer, of course. That's why all the houses are locked. They're waiting for something like that. Waiting to be moved into when there's another big strike. Bodie is waiting to be a town again, to fill in the gaps left by the fires, to come alive. Funny thing about this town, you don't see any animals. No dogs, no cats. Even the birdhouses are deserted. Maybe that's why it's so quiet. You can hear your footsteps following you. I looked in at the church. That's one of the few buildings that isn't locked. That and the jail. Church is in pretty good shape. Few boards pull loose in the roof, but it's still pretty sound. And you can read the 10 Commandments without any trouble. Well, that's the town. Population has dropped considerably from the 12,000 they used to have, but they say it will come back. They all believe that. I believed it too when I talked to them. But when I got back to the city, saw that big, noisy, sprawling beehive, it became hard for me to realize there really was such a town as Bodie stuck up there in the mountains, behind all those movie stars' homes and orange groves. Town of Bodie. Bodie, California. No dogs, no cats, no modern conveniences. Population, 9.